The where loose change makes something of itself deal. Because only at McDonald's can a stop at the toll booth turn into an impromptu breakfast stop.
Welcome to McDonald's. Can I take your order?
It's hard to beat any size McCafe iced coffee for 99 cents until 11 a.m. But pairing it with the new Cheese Danish is a good way to try. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Direct-to-Video Connoisseur Podcast. It's Matt. I'm back again, kind of, sort of getting my way back into things, I guess. It's the best way to look at it. So I noticed that with my TalkShoe account that I had the ability to make free podcasts on my own. In the past, what I was doing is using a Mixler account that I think whoever was running the podcast night that I was working on when I was doing the podcast with Jamie, that Mixler account, somebody was paying for that, but I could record myself, do my podcast through that, and then just upload them here to TalkShoe. But now I don't have access to that account anymore. So I was trying to figure out a good way for me to record myself and make podcasts, and I thought I might as well try TalkShoe out and see how it goes. So as we're getting back into things, I thought I wanted to try to get the podcast back up and going. I mean, first, the big thing was trying to get the blog itself back up after the long hiatus. Long story short, I fell into some things personally where I wasn't keeping up with things, and then I let the domain slip. And once the domain slipped, somebody bought the Matt Movie Guy domain and used all of the Matt Movie Guy links for spam purposes. I guess they were like there's sort of sites that just sort of had malware and whatnot. It wasn't a good thing, and so that essentially made my blog corrupted. So I had to go through and remove all of the Matt Movie Guy links. I've removed a good chunk of them. Had to roll back the name, so it's now back to the dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com name. So it's back to that original name. So a lot of things like that. So it was a sort of one of those things where after that happened, I was like, man, I really don't have the energy to get back into this and let it slip a little bit longer, which I kind of wish I hadn't done. I wish I'd gotten back into this sooner, but it just sort of happened the way it was. But now that I'm back doing the blog, I wanted to kind of get the podcast going again as well. And one of the big reasons was as I'm doing the blogs, a lot of things get left on the editing room floor, so to speak. My blog format, I try to keep my blog format somewhat brief so people can go in and read and get to the meat of what it's about, still keep it entertaining as well. But so I try to stick with my 8-paragraph format to not get too big. With that 8-paragraph format, I always got the first one that's the introduction of, how I came across the movie, why I'm reviewing it. The last one is always the wrap up. And then in between in those 6, I kind of go over the movie some, but usually there's other things in there where I might talk about myself personally to let people get to know me a little bit better, that kind of thing. So as you can imagine, a lot doesn't really, it's hard to find what to put in those 6 paragraphs, what's important and what isn't. And I thought this blog, the podcast for right now might be a good way for me to, looks like I was disconnected for a second. Okay. To maybe a way to, get, cover some of those areas that I miss or that I can't get into as much on the blog format. And then, as we kind of get going and I kind of get the hang of this podcasting thing a little bit better, I'm doing it on my own more, maybe start to add in guests, bring more people on, start to, kind of get into more things like we used to in the past, which, I mean, it was a lot of fun doing the podcast before when Jamie and I did it together. It was really great. And then having the guests that we had on, fellow bloggers and whatnot, it was always fun, and it was a fun conversation. So eventually I'd like to get back to that. Right now, it's just kind of going to do it this way. Just sort of going over some of the movies I've reviewed before and maybe some of the things that I missed or didn't discuss. So the first one that I want to talk about is Goon, which I did a couple weeks ago. Movie from 2011, which stars Sean William Scott as a hockey player goon who kind of makes his way up through the ranks in minor league hockey as an enforcer, getting into fights with people. I've always been a fan of hockey. I've always been a sports fan in general. But sports movies on the blog, it's always a little bit of a risk because they don't usually get the same kind of traffic that the usual action, horror, sci-fi, low budget type movies do. And I'm always keen on that. If I'm going to do a sports movie, I try to make sure that it has something that everybody who reads the blog would be interested in, because I'm conscious of that. I don't want it to be a situation where I'm just posting movies just for me, but I do want there to be, I want people to be interested in them as well. I try to pick movies that I think might, the people that come to the blog are going to be interested in as well. And so I think where Goon, where I thought that might have that interest is there's some actors in it, in particular Kim Coates, who we've done a ton of his movies here on the blog, and I'm always a fan of Kim Coates, and I've seen from other readers that they're big Kim Coates fans as well. So he was one that I thought might help. Eugene Levy, is a big name. Liev Schreiber. So I thought that might give it a little bit more of appeal, and so that's why I went with it. Again, hockey season starting. I thought it might be kind of fun to get into it. But that is a thought that goes into my mind, that sports movies don't always play well on here. People aren't always as interested in them, so it's something I'm not always as big on. One thing I did realize, though, when I went back through my history of blogging, is that I've actually done two other hockey movies before this. I did Slapshot 2 that had Stephen Baldwin, and I did National Lampoon's Pucked that starred John Bon Jovi. So this actually isn't the first time I've gotten into hockey movies, but yeah, and I don't think either of those had a lot of views. I think probably the number one sports movie was Rocky IV. So I don't know if you'd even call that a sports movie, but that's like probably our most popular one on the blog was that one. And so, as I was watching that movie, it was one of those things where I couldn't find anything specifically wrong with it as I was going, but I noticed I was checking the bar at the screen to see how much I'd gotten into it, how far along I was. And I want to say, like, around the first 20 minutes, I thought, wow, we've just covered a lot of ground here. The main character, Sean William Scott, he starts off as a bouncer in Massachusetts. He's at a hockey game, a minor league hockey game. Player comes into the audience and attacks his friend. He beats the guy up, gets a gig working for that minor league hockey team, and then gets the call up to a bigger minor league hockey team in Halifax. And it's like all of this happens in the first 20 minutes, and it seems like, okay, now what's next? What are we going to do from here? And that's where I think the film, for me, it kind of felt like a lot like where it was spinning its wheels. Okay, they had to just kind of create these ups and downs, give him the love interest, make the love interest not work out, make it work out again. The team likes him. Members of the team don't like him. Now they like him again. He does well, he fails, he does well again. It was a lot of that kind of that progression. And I think with sports movies, one of the big problems is that they do tend to devolve into this, Rocky, Bad News Bears paradigm, right? Where with Rocky, right, it's always the underdog, the one guy underdog who against all odds somehow manages to get it done and win. And of course, I mean, with Stallone, he really hit the nail on the head with that. He did it really well. But then it's like, everything else seems derivative. And then of course the Bad News Bears, it's the ragtag group of people, right, that somehow manage to make it all work and do it all successfully. And it seems like most sports movies are that. Some of my all-time favorites, deviate from the paradigm. Of course, Raging Bull is my absolute favorite number one sports movie. And I love that movie isn't that at all. It's, Scorsese taking a true story and pulling in these elements from films that he grew up with, from people like Fellini. It just you watch it and it has that atmosphere to it. But it was a true story, and that seems to be a big part of today's sports movie, is that it's based on a true story, but it's so dramatized and horrible, and not cinematic, but just sort of this syrupy, sweet, saccharine kind of like, oh, how nice everybody is thing. The Blind Side comes to mind, Seabiscuit, that kind of stuff. And And I felt like Goon did devolve into that, unfortunately. I don't know how if it was overly syrupy sweet, but it still was enough of that for me that it didn't really work overall. But then, of course, the movie ends, and they show clips of the guy, the main character that this movie was based off of. This guy, Doug Smith, who he was a enforcer in Massachusetts. Was a hockey player enforcer who played through a lot of minor league teams. They would just sign him just to do that, to get into fights with people. And you see this guy in the credits who has this thick Massachusetts accent, and they're asking him about how he's like, yeah, they signed me just to see if people were acting up. I'd go, beat the crap out of them or whatever. And that was so beautiful that I was like, why wasn't that the movie, right? It should have been a documentary. It should have covered that person. And that's something I find with a lot of these based on true story sports movies, is that the documentary would have been better. With The Blind Side, for example, ESPN did a feature on Michael Orr and what his life was like. It was like a outside the lines hour-long piece that was much more compelling than the movie was with Sandra Bullock and all of that. And I think that's where Goon sort of missed the mark for me on that. Now, the one thing that I thought was very interesting about it is that, we talk about our action movies here, we talk about the horror movies and the gore that's in those, and this movie was pretty gory for that, which in a way it was almost didn't fit, because it's supposed to be this nice, love story kind of thing, this scrappy underdog makes good. Well, at the same time, people's teeth are flying all over the place and blood is being spit out everywhere, and raising the price of corn syrup across the country without the amount they were using in the movie. So that was a little bit of an odd thing as well. That I think it was trying really hard to be Rocky in a hockey movie. And I think it just doesn't always work. And in this case, I think that's what the problem was it just didn't quite work for me on that. But it was fun to see certain people like Kim Coates in the movie. I'm always a big Kim Coates fan. And I think I said this in the blog, that he's always a villain a lot of times when we see him. And I think, anyone who's seen a lot of action movies like I have, they probably recognize Kim Coates, from, playing that villain, or like maybe like the heel, like the second down from the main villain kind of character. So you almost never like Kim Coates, but you like him. You like him as an actor. So it was kind of fun to be able to root for him for once, because he played the Sean William Scott's coach. So I did like that part of it. I did like Kim Coates, but I think it for me it was like I wanted to get a hockey movie in for the beginning of the hockey season, but I think overall, ultimately it kind of fell flat, and it just sort of devolved into that Rocky paradigm. All right, so that's enough on Goon. Now, I think usually the way podcasts work, right, is that you're supposed to have like kind of a funny bumper music thing that kind of goes from one transition into the other, and I don't really have that right now, so I'm hoping to have that soon. But next up, we're going to be talking about Clownado. Clownado is one that I was going through my email. I finally got back into the direct video connoisseur email, which I still have about 300 that haven't been read from a couple of years ago that I'm just going to go back and see just in case there's anything I missed in there. But I was going through, I had over 1,000 in my inbox, in my direct video connoisseur inbox. And one that I saw in there was about this Clownado movie. It was a whole bunch of different movies that were listed there, asking if I wanted to screen. But one of them was Clownado, and I was taken in by the fact that it was a Todd Sheets film. Now, I was first introduced to Todd Sheets through Mo Porn and Doug Tilley's podcast, No Budget Nightmares. They had talked about some Todd Sheets films, and I'd seen a couple. I'd seen Zombie Apocalypse, and I think there's another one. I can't remember the name of it right now. There's a couple of his that I'd seen. And I was really just a fan of it was like that kind of low budget schlock horror that I just got a kick out of. And so, the other one was Nightmare Asylum. That was the other movie that I had seen. So I was kind of curious to see how this one was going to look with that. And of course, it's Halloween, and it's October, so it's always good to try to get some horror movies in. And clowns and a Clownado, the idea of a clown tornado, is always going to play well on the blog. So asked for a screener, checked it out. Now, one of the interesting things about the screener, that I always appreciate being, receiving screeners, that somebody's going to take the time to give me a free copy of a movie to check it out for the review, and I always take that part seriously. The one thing is that the screeners always have some sort of like thing across the video that says like for screening purposes only or whatever. So you're stuck only using the stills that they give you with the promotional package. And that's one thing that always feels limiting for me, because I really enjoy picking the right images for the blog. I like to pick out the ones that, the scenes in the movie that I think, stood out for me, or that I think look really good here, and that people will connect with when they're looking the blog over. So that is one of the more limiting parts for me, is that I don't get to pick out the images when I do the screener, because it's either picking pictures that say for screening purposes only, but it's got the characters I want in it, or it's got the scene that I want, or just taking the ones that they have and, they look nicer on the blog. And so I usually err on the side of the latter, but that is one of the drawbacks for me. It's one of the reasons why I don't like using Hulu for streaming movies, because when you pause on Hulu, it won't remove the bar or the play button or any of that stuff. It all keeps it there, so I have to try to catch my image on the fly while the movie's playing. Netflix, I think, out of all of them, is really the best when it comes to being a movie blogger. Like, they really, their interface is fantastic for screen grabbing, capturing images, and then I just use I use MS Paint actually to cut and paste my images and put them into the blog. I'm sure other people have more sophisticated software, but that's usually how I do it. So yeah, it's always nice to have something like that, like Netflix. It makes it really easy. Now, so back to where I was talking about with the movie. So yeah, I thought the idea of a Clownado would be funny. Now, as I'm watching the movie, there's 3 minutes of credits, 3 minutes of opening credits that was just like nothing. It's like kind of the same images of clowns on a loop over and over again. And then the first 20-25 minutes or so, really nothing happened. Yes, things happen, but it just kind of goes along at this plotting pace where you've got these characters with this dialogue that's not really doing much, and they're talking about cheating, this woman and her boyfriend are cheating on the husband or something. It's kind of nothing really big happening there. And I really thought you could have cut that part out. But I think, as I said in the blog piece, had it been something that I was just reviewing for the blog, I probably would have just stopped it. And I would have just, moved on to something else, which that has happened before. I'll start a movie, get a few minutes into it and say, or, maybe 15, 20 minutes into it and say, I don't want to invest my time in this. I'm going to move on to something else, because, I review like one movie a week. So, you got to make these movies count if you're going to review them, because, I want to make sure it's something that people are going to be interested in. And if I'm not interested in it right away, especially if there's no investment, right? If it's just something that's streaming on Netflix, I'll watch the first few minutes of it and then say, okay, let's move on. Some exceptions might be like a Dolph movie. If Dolph Lundgren's in a movie, then I definitely will watch it all the way, because just getting his movie on the blog is worth it. Seagal, people like that, sometimes they're just having their movie on the blog is worth it. But this one definitely wouldn't have been that case. But because it was a screener, I plotted through it, because I was reviewing it for a purpose. And the movie picks up. It gets much better. It sort of wraps up that first 20-25 minutes, and then we get to the scene where a main character picks up this other main character who's an Elvis impersonator who's hitchhiking, and they go to a strip club, and then after that diner, and that's when the Clownado first shows up. And from there, it's just really great. It's just a fantastic, just kind of a fun, I shouldn't say fantastic, but it's a fun, bad horror romp that I really enjoyed. Some of the things I left out in reviewing the blog, one is that you have a Linnea Quigley bait and switch. So she's barely in the movie. She's on the cover. She's listed on the cover. She's only in the scene. I guess it's not a strip club. It's like a bar with a topless dancer, I guess is what it is. And she runs the bar with the topless dancer. So she's only in it for that one scene. And then that's it. There's no more Linnea Quigley. So she has maybe 2 or 3 minutes at the most of screen time. Yet her name is listed third on the list of names. And actually, with there being 5 names listed on the cover, hers is right in the middle. So it's almost like the most prominent of the names. I don't know if maybe that was on purpose, that maybe her, I don't know if maybe that was on purpose, that maybe her people insisted on that. If you go through the credits, you see a lot of like Linnea Quigley's assistant, her hair person, all of that kind of stuff. So maybe they had insisted, but it definitely is bait and switches, right? That you would have her name on the cover and she's only in it for 2 minutes. Same thing. Another cameo was Ellen Dietz, of course, from Exorcist. She's also barely in the movie, just for a little bit longer than Quigley, but not that much longer. And those you could call them bait and switches. The other thing too is that they also were kind of like nods to horror fans. So, maybe for a horror fan, they might get a kick out of just seeing them in there for a second. I think if they weren't listed on the cover and you didn't go into it thinking like they're going to be a big part of this movie, it would be better just to be like, oh my God, look, there's Linnea Quigley. That's so great. That's crazy. That was her, whereas now you're just like, oh, that was it. She was just in there for a few minutes. But it is a curious thing because we always blame the bait and switch on the filmmaker, but it's possible that it wasn't the film. I don't know if Todd Sheets had as much to do with it being her name being across the top like that. I don't know how much she had to do with, or he had to do with, being on the cover and all of that. But yeah, if you're going into this looking for Linnea Quigley, she's not in it too much. So that was one thing that I thought about. I didn't kind of get into it too much, but the Clownado is interesting because the clowns use the tornado to travel, but they don't. It's not actually a tornado of clowns. They're in the tornado, but it's not like this tornado swoops through and kills everybody. It's more like they show up in the tornado, it stops, and then they're there, and they go and kill people. Then they just the tornado is created again, and they just move off in another direction. So that was a little different from like you think of like Sharknado, right, where it's like the sharks are in the tornado and they're spinning around, grabbing people and eating people and stuff like that. That part was a little bit different, but I think this one was a fun time. I think this is the kind of movie that people come to the direct-to-video connoisseur to check out. They want to see a Clownado. When I tell people what I do for with the blog, how the blog works, I think Clownado is what they first think, right? Or something like a Clownado comes to mind. And it was nice that, once we got past that initial slow period, that the movie lived up to that it was that kind of a schlock horror romp that you really want. With Todd Sheets with his movies, and I talked about this on the blog, it looks like he repurposes a lot of culinary items to make the gore and stuff, which is kind of funny. I did really like the jams and jellies that he used, and that kind of thing is always kind of funny just to see. Like it doesn't look like it's really even connected with what's happening on the screen. It's just off screen. Here's some things getting ripped apart and stuff, which is really, really interesting. I always get a kick out of that. But I think for some people, some like real horror purists, they won't get a kick out of that. They'll be like, this is ridiculous. I want legit special effects. I want good gore. And I totally respect that. And that was something maybe I should have brought up on the blog a little bit more as well. Though hopefully somebody who is more of a purist would have gotten the gist of that from it. But yeah, true, so a horror fan who kind of takes it more seriously might think that this is just too silly for them. And I totally get that as well, that this might not quite fit in with what they were looking for. But yeah, overall, for me, I think once you get past that initial low period, it definitely lived up to what I would expect from a Todd Sheets movie for me. It's interesting when it comes to these screeners because you always want to try to be fair, and in some cases you even get to talk to the filmmakers themselves and get a sense of what they were going for with these movies. And so it is hard to completely pan it or completely kill it. And luckily this one, it did have it did redeem itself afterwards. But that is always a tricky thing. It's something, of course, that when I started this, I never had any idea that I would even get to that point where I was talking to people who were making the movie. I got into this just to talk about the bad movies that I liked watching, and I would make fun of them, and I started talking to, I think, it really hit home. Like, I think a couple times I'd made some comments about a movie, and Albert Pyun commented and said, oh yeah, no, this is what happened with the movie. This is why this happened, or this is what happened here. And it was kind of a shock to me that, like, one, that a filmmaker would be mentioning, and he wasn't the only one, other ones have as well. But that you get that perspective on how it works. And I don't think I ever expected that part of it. It has, I do go back and look at some of the old reviews that I wrote, especially when I first started this, like back in 2007, so 12 years ago now. I look at some of those old reviews and think, boy, I was really tough, or boy, I was calling people stupid, and I shouldn't have been calling people stupid, or I shouldn't, that this is rude the way I was talking about these these movies. There is a way to make fun of a movie without saying those kinds of things. And I think definitely it's part of doing this that I didn't expect when I started this back then. I didn't expect to be able to get this perspective on how movies are made, what low budget movie makers go through to get their films done, how difficult it is. And it is something that I do try to take seriously when I review them, is to sort of pay respect to that, to make sure. And with these kinds of low budget companies coming to me wanting me to do their films, I definitely want to try to help out. I think it was Universal that wanted me to do some kind of free social media ad campaign. And I did see some other bloggers that were doing their ad campaign, but I'm thinking like Universal, I mean, their rounding error would cover my student loans, right? So I don't need to be doing free things for them. But for other low budget movies that really need to get the word out there, it is nice to be able to help them if I can. And again, something that I just didn't expect to happen with this. All right, so I'm going to wrap up here. I think I talked long enough here. But again, we're gonna try to maybe build this up a little bit more, maybe get some more imaging and some music and whatnot involved with it. But hopefully just kind of get back into doing it a bit more. Again, if you have any questions, comments, feel free to reach out. I am checking the email again, but probably the best way is the Facebook page, especially a message, comments, anything like that. I'm happy to respond and chat. I'm sort of back in this now, and hopefully I'm back in it to stay, that there isn't going to be another hiatus. All right, thanks everybody, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Hear that? That's the sound of a patient whose health data is protected from a cyber attack. And that's the sound of a financial system that's digitally secured from bad actors. Right now, there's an invisible war being fought on a digital battlefield that impacts what we do every day. That's why at Peraton, we do the can't be done to help protect the vital systems we rely on. Because if we don't, the alternative is unimaginable. Peraton.